Hello, everyone. Right now, we are live a little bit before scheduled time. We're going to give minutes for people to settle in. And in the meantime, so Um, to give you a little bit of context for this webinar, we had our previous webinar on positioning in tech services, and what we recognized from that was we talked about positioning, and that determines okay who your target customer is, what your strategy is. But it's not just about strategy. You have to take the strategy, you have to turn it into execution. And when you are executing, it's about the nitty gritty details. It's the we can tell you at a high level that you need to do cold calling, LinkedIn, cold email marketing, content, blogs, all of those things, and to some extent, all of those things work. And but they also don't work, and we see a lot of frustrated founders come to us complaining, hey, we can't get this to do these work, I'm not getting any outcomes from my marketing. And that's the marketing, we need to approach it as an iterative experimental journey, because only the market and only people and customers signing in is going to tell you what's needed. And that's why we wanted to take this in a very, hey, what is it that you have to analyze? What is it that you have to look at? What is it that you have to do to get what uh, to be able to start uh, analyzing, seeing is what I'm doing right? Is it a waste of time? Is and actually start working on your journey towards fixing things. For that, you see the topic of diagnosing leaks in your marketing funnel. And I'm really proud of the two speakers that we have for this. One of them, our first speaker is going to be Fatma Athar. She's going to tell you about uh, the marketing funnels in general, and she's a part of Vixul's marketing team, and so she has a lot of she has works with a lot of tech services companies from that perspective. But then she also before Vixul, she was actually a part of Pasha, and that exposed her to all of Pakistan's tech services companies. The other speaker that we have is Sana Khalid. Sana is has been a CEO and has built one of the largest has been the CEO for the largest co-working spaces in Pakistan, and she has an executive leadership program, and then and also leads the business podcast, and it's somebody who is very knowledgeable about business, who I personally pay attention listen to myself all the time. So really happy to have her here. I'm and Thank you, Noor, for your message. And I was actually going to ask people to say hi if they can. It gives us. We're going to be asking some questions. If you can post those in comments, we can see your comments, and we'll be responding to your questions from there. And I was going to ask people to say hi and raise some eyes, but thank you, Noor, for doing it for me. I don't even need to ask anyone. And yes, thank you for welcoming me. It's really nice to be welcomed as a host, and for all of definitely a lot of work. So really appreciate you saying that. With that, I would say thank you, Yusuf. Hello. And by the way, we also have the same webinar open on YouTube. If you're more comfortable joining on YouTube, it's you'll be able to get. You have we should be live in both places, so you can comment in either place. And with that, I am going to give the stage over to Fatma.
Hi everyone, thank you for making the time to be here today. We've got a very interesting session planned for you. We will start by going over some of the basics of the marketing funnel, and I'm sure some of you may already be aware of that. This is just to kind of give you a context to what Sana will be talking about, which will be the common problems that actually plague marketing funnels, particularly for tech services companies. So, for a moment, I would like you to put your marketer cap on and ask yourself what's your top priority as a marketer. Feel free to go ahead and answer in the comments. So, if you were to say that your top priority as a marketer is to close deals, you would be in good company. That's actually one of the most important things for most marketers. And that's where the marketing funnel comes in. Your marketing funnel is the journey that your customers take from being just someone who's just heard of your brand to someone who's actually a loyal customer and keeps coming back to your brand. For tech services companies, there's a lot of different ways to look at defining a funnel, but the one that makes the most sense to us starts with awareness and then it moves people over to consideration, and then conversion is where you get the sale. And then we've added loyalty. Now, a lot of models of the marketing funnel don't actually include loyalty, but for a tech services business, loyalty is one of the most important parts of your marketing strategy and of the marketing funnel that you design. Because in case of a services business, the cost of acquiring a new customer is drastically less. It's about 25% the cost of getting a completely new customer as opposed to just upselling to your existing customers. And just improving customer retention by 5% can give you profits that are higher by 95%. So that's one reason why that we've included the loyalty loop within this marketing funnel as well. So let's take a look at the steps of this funnel. First, before that, just letting you know, a lot of people think, and I can see that a lot of you are saying you want to have more leads, you want to close more deals, you want to build a pipeline. Keep in mind, tech services sales are slow. You need, on average, 8 touch points before you can actually make the sale. Your touch points start at the top of the funnel. So at the top of the funnel, what you're looking at is a visibility challenge. You want to create awareness about your brand. You want to create interest in your brand. And what you're trying to achieve is finding the right audience and helping them find you. There are people who need your services. And this is where you design your content, design your SEO strategy, invest in paid advertising, and look for earned media, which is, for example, PR or news outlets that will put you in front of the audience that you need to be in front of. You need to get their attention and then you need to move them to the next step, which is the middle of the funnel. Now, at the middle of the funnel, you're in a good spot. You've developed a sort of initial conversation with the person. You've started talking to them about what you have to offer and why they might be considering you. You need to prove that you understand your problem, as we've written extensively about this on our blog as well. As an emerging tech services provider, you're not just selling them something that they can find elsewhere. You are often working with a technology that is very poorly understood. And you need to be the expert that can help them not just understand the technology, but also understand the problem that it solves. So you have to show that with your content, and you have to show how you stack against your competition. Typically, what this means is that middle of the funnel strategies involve creating case studies, organizing webinars, publishing white papers, and doing demos if you are working with a particular platform. Once you've established a level of trust here, you move to the bottom of the funnel, which is where the purchase comes in. Obviously, it's not as smooth as this. Keep in mind that when you're talking to potential customers, they may move back and forth between stages of the funnel. But let's say everything's been going smoothly, you've brought them to the bottom of the funnel. This is where you have to get them to make a decision. This is where you get your sale. So the things that can push a sale, that can help them make that purchase, include testimonials, that can include all how personalized your messaging is. It can be a limited time offer, and of course, your webinars and platform demos continue to remain an important strategy to showcase your expertise, which ultimately drives the purchase. This is where a lot of companies stumble. So you can have marketing that brings people to this point, and then leads can just drop off. And Sana will actually talk about why that happens. A few more points. So regarding the sales process for emerging tech services, it's not the most simple and straightforward sales process. ETS typically have much longer sales cycles. It can take anywhere from 4 to 7 months. The decision making is also a lot more complex because if you think about what we said earlier, a lot of times you're not just selling a technology that's already understood. Your client might not have resources internally who can help them understand what the problem is and how your technology solves it. So there can be a lot more decision makers and there will be a lot more education that you will be required to perform. And that makes the decision making complex. And of course, the stakes are higher because they are betting on you just like you're betting on them. And they need to understand that they can rely on you. So, with that, let's move over to Sana, and she will help you understand how you can perform a health checkup on your marketing funnel.
Thank you, Fatma, for that overview. Like Fatma mentioned, I think most of us who are in this webinar, I'm hoping we've seen some variation of the marketing and sales funnels. There's lots of variations out there. When I look at these funnels, one of the things that's very evident is that they are designed for sellers and marketers. So they're basically simplified versions of how our leads go from one stage to the next. They fit very neatly, like all our leads fit neatly into different stages in our CRMs, from the time that they find out about us all the way to making the actual purchase or buying from us. But sometimes I think what we forget, and I'd just like to point that out before we start talking about diagnosing leaks in the funnels, is that on the other side of the funnel, the reality is very, very different, which is where the buyer is, right? So the buyer is trying to make a buying decision, which does not necessarily fit into the same sort of stages. Their goal is not to move from one stage to another. Especially with B2B, like Fatma mentioned, it's a long process, it's complex, there are multiple decision makers involved, there are multiple touch points. Each person in that buying decision is looking for answers to different questions. They're looking to consume information in different formats through different channels. They have multiple considerations and they move back and forth. So I think one of the most important things which is like an overarching problem, is to understand that the gaps or the misalignment between the marketing and sales funnels and the buyer's actual journey is the reason or the thing where most of the leakages occur throughout, and that cuts across the stages. So if your marketing and sales funnels are not in sync with the buyer's decision making journey or the buyer's journey to buy something from someone, that could mean what questions they're looking for, what information they're looking for, at what time in their journey they're looking for that information, so on and so forth, and how you are presenting that information, whether it's the same information they want, etc. That's where the leakages occur. So before we even talk about diagnosing the problem and where the leakage is, it's important to understand that if your funnel is not in sync, that's one of the most important sort of problems. And so we see that mostly in the form of a misaligned funnel, but also trying to sort of use a one size fits all approach. So one example would be when I was sort of running the co-working space and we were trying to sell serviced offices. There were two very distinct kinds of buyers that we had. One was large enterprise clients let's say Microsoft, Dell, so on and so forth. And then there's these small 5-person businesses that are looking for a small space to work out of. And both their journeys are really, really different. So a large enterprise client does not come to me through the form on my website. They come to me through a real estate agent, for example. And that real estate agent has already shown them multiple options, has shown them pictures, has given them an idea of the pricing, so on and so forth. So they're not even entering my marketing funnel at the top of the funnel. They're entering somewhere in the middle of that funnel, versus the 5-person business maybe even hasn't even decided that they really want a co-working space, and so they're really at that stage where they'll probably need more nurturing, more convincing, so on and so forth. So when we're optimizing our sales funnel, our goal really is to optimize at every stage for every different type of customer that we're trying to cater to, and not try and sort of have this one size fits all approach. So one, your funnel cannot be a linear funnel where you want everybody to go through the same process. And two, personalization can be a great thing. So just putting that out there before we start talking about diagnosing problems. Now, when we're diagnosing problems and objective is to optimize our funnels, I think whenever we want to optimize something, whether it's in business or in life, we're basically, one prerequisite is that we have to measure it, right? And so maybe that could mean the number of leads that are actually coming through, the number of people that are on your website, maybe the cost per lead, so on and so forth. And not only do you need to measure it, you also need to know whether those are good or bad numbers. So that means you need some sort of benchmarking or KPIs in place as well. And so when you're looking at your metrics, maybe your metrics will not tell you exactly what the problem is, but they will be able to maybe give you a hint as to where to look for to find the problem. So what we're going to do in the next few minutes is to look at some of those metrics, then see what are those metrics hinting towards in terms of a broader problem, and then sort of do a quick deep dive into those broader problems in terms of what the common mistakes are and how to fix them. This is a loaded topic and we have very little time, so I'm going to try and quickly go through each of these and pack as much value as there can be. But feel free to sort of add your comments and questions, and we'll come to them towards the end. So let's say you're actually, Fatma, is there a way to increase the size of the slide for some? Okay, it's better now. I think some problem with my screen. Okay, so let's say you're looking at your metrics and you figure that maybe the people who are coming to your website are not staying there for too long. Maybe they're not opening your emails, or maybe there's high unsubscribe rates, so on and so forth. A lot of times what that suggests, what these numbers or bad numbers or lower numbers or higher bounce rates suggest, is that your content is not resonating with your audience. In very sort of generic terms, this could mean that your messaging is weak. Maybe a lot of times we see with technical founders that the content that's on their website or on their blogs or social media is so technical that it's very difficult for a normal person to even understand what they're saying. Maybe it's not addressing the pain points or not speaking their language. So one of the things that is almost a prerequisite if you want to fix your content is to understand your positioning. And somebody I think also mentioned your ideal customer profile, so we'll talk about that. And I know that Vixul did a webinar. Ali mentioned you guys did a webinar on positioning with Adir earlier, so maybe it would be a good opportunity to go back and look at that webinar. But understanding your positioning is extremely important in terms of figuring out what it is that's not right about your content, and also the general sort of flow and design of the sales funnel, right? Or the marketing funnel. So for example, let's say if I was to go and say that I'm a digital transformation consulting firm, there are some assumptions, some comparisons, some biases that automatically kick in the other person's mind. Maybe they're thinking, are you competing with the likes of McKinsey and Deloitte of the world? How are you better than them? So on and so forth. versus and it's also not very clear how I can help a specific organization within a specific industry and so on and so forth. So who am I working for? What do I do for them? It's not clear. And I can't say how I'm better than the others in the field. Versus if I was to say that I help healthcare startups with less than $5 million in revenue improve their digital compliance. That is a much crisper, clearer messaging. It helps you improve or even think about what your content should be catered towards, who it should be geared towards, what you should be talking about, and how even your funnel can sort of mimic the buyer's journey. The second thing, obviously, is again, generic advice, but important is understanding your buyer's actual pain points. And I think more than just understanding, it's in terms of content, it means, is your content just talking about services that you offer, or are you actually able to speak their language and show what the value for them is? So particularly for enterprise clients, and when you're selling to a business, every buying decision is based on how much money can I make, or how much money can I save, or whether I can do something faster or make it easier, because that will also help me make more money or save money. So are you able to connect your service to the value that you're actually offering? So that's another way to strengthen how you put your content out. And the third, of course, is understanding your buyer journey from a content perspective, is how you can personalize your buyer journey for your content for your ideal customer profile and where they are in that buying stage. Um, with marketing, I think one extremely important thing is that no matter how many tweaks you make to your content and how you write your content and how much time you spend writing it, the only way to figure out if it's going to work is to actually test it out. So A/B testing your content formats, your headlines, your messaging, your CTAs, that would be a great way to figure out, better improve your content, right? Let's say you go back to your metrics and you look at a high volume of low quality leads, and you'll often see sales teams sort of complaining about leads not converting, or bad quality leads really going forward in the process. um, Qualification of leads is obviously a very important process in the marketing funnel and the sales funnel, but it's often a very overlooked process because a lot of people don't understand how to qualify leads. And so what you see is obviously a lot of not very good or high potential leads moving forward in the process, which means that your salespeople are spending time, or your marketing efforts are sort of being, you're putting effort into marketing on clients and leads, or potential clients and leads, that either will take a lot of time to convert or will not convert at all. And so sort of understanding that one way is to sort of put some filters. One is benchmarking, is the lead worth pursuing at all? The other is to improve your lead scoring mechanism. So, for example, and lead scoring mechanism basically gives you a second layer in terms of how do you prioritize the leads that you're actually already, say, benchmark. They've sort of fulfilled your initial criteria. Maybe they have the time, they have the budget, they're actually looking for what you want. But if you want to prioritize within those leads, then your scoring criteria helps. So let's say if somebody has attended a webinar and they've downloaded a research paper from your website and they've asked you these two questions, each one of those things can have scoring attached to it, and based on how many of those things the lead has done, you can decide whether or not to spend more time on it, and how much time you want to spend. Similarly, I think this is only doable, again, if you have the right data. So to be able to build these benchmarks, to be able to build a scoring criteria, you definitely need to leverage the data that you have in your CRM to even first understand what constitutes a high potential lead, right? Or a better lead, or should be a sales qualified lead for that matter. The next would be if your cost per lead is really high, for example, or your return on ad spend is really low. And I think this is fairly simple in terms of what that refers to. It obviously means that your ad spend or your targeting is not very effective, or maybe you're relying too much on underperforming channels. And I think a lot of the things you'll see that the common theme across these problems is how well you understand who you're selling to and their buying decisions and that journey. So if where is your client actually looking for information? Do they rely on LinkedIn for it? Do they follow specific influencers? Do they go on platforms like Upwork? Do they go on platforms like Clutch, for example? Based on that, you need to identify, and data will tell you what your underperforming or better performing channels are. So maybe optimizing for those is extremely important as well. Then in terms of targeting, again, goes back to how well do you know who is making the decision, not just who that business is that you work for, but who is the first person that needs to find you on this channel versus, let's say, email marketing and so on and so forth. So understanding you're targeting, who are you targeting? Let's say, again, going back to the real estate example, if it's a large enterprise, they would have a separate person for real estate procurement, for instance, who would go and check the real estate space and so on and so forth. So that's your first point of contact, versus later in the stages there'll probably be finance, and there'll be a security check who looks after, is there enough fire exits, so on and so forth. And then there's the CEO who's maybe looking for, what the ROI is on this entire investment. So experimenting with new channels and figuring out which ones you need to spend more on, which you need to spend less on, is extremely important. Another reason your ads might not be working, again, is maybe your messaging is not clear. Your ad creatives are not that strong, for example. And a great way to, so again, test them is to try out through A/B testing what really works and what doesn't work, and sort of experiment a little bit with those channels. Another one, I think this is also a common one, where there's low conversion from SQLs to closed leads. Your marketing and sales team are unable to sort of collaborate between each other, so on and so forth. And I think this is a very, very common one, because oftentimes marketing and sales teams are pitched against each other rather than working together. So it seems like their roles are also not collaborative. Instead, they're very isolated. So the marketing teams brings the leads, and then the sales team sort of converts those leads into revenue. But an effective marketing funnel would actually make sure that there is some level of collaboration. There is some sort of shared or mutual understanding of what even is a good lead that the sales team wants to see. Having shared goals and accountability between the teams, and so on and so forth. So one of the one of the ways to do this is to actually put together a service level agreement. But even if that sounds like a lot of work, or it sounds like something that's very complicated, just very regular feedbacks where the sales team can share what leads actually converted, why they didn't convert, what the objections were, what was missing in terms of qualification, so on and so forth, is extremely important. So again, going back to identifying what actually makes a high potential client, what actually is a marketing qualified lead, what is a sales qualified lead, and giving them actual verifiers and sort of qualifiers could be extremely important. Another one would be, let's say, if you have low lead velocity rate. I think Fatma will be sharing. Are we sharing a glossary at the end with all these metrics and terms in case somebody doesn't understand?
Yes, we
Okay.
will. That will be sent by tomorrow.
Okay, great. So a low lead velocity rate simply would mean what the rate is at which your month-on-month leads are growing, the number of leads that you have. Maybe your drop-off rates are high. Again, going back to those metrics and seeing maybe they're referring to bottlenecks within your funnel. A lot of times when we're thinking of friction in the bottlenecks, we think about how can we reduce the number of clicks, for example. But sometimes it's not about that. It's also about how that information is presented. Maybe it's not easy to navigate through your landing pages. Maybe it's not easy to find information on your page. So it's not just, friction is not necessarily just about removing the number of steps, or reducing the number of steps, or reducing the fields in your form, and so on and so forth, even though those can also be potential reasons why people are dropping off. But in other ways, it can also just mean that maybe you're not making it easy for somebody to move from one stage to the next stage in their buying journey, but also in your marketing funnel, right? So improving the UX, for example, if you can see that mobile conversion rates are lower than desktop conversion rates, for example, right? That could mean that your usability, maybe your mobile app or your website has usability issues. If leads are taking significantly longer to move from one stage to the next, that could be a friction somewhere in those stages. Maybe people are abandoning, for example, cart abandonments are frequent. Maybe if visitors reach a certain form but then they don't fill it out, that could be another sort of indicator of friction in your funnel. So simplifying your UX design, your user experience on your website or your app, whatever it is that you're using, having very clear actionable CTAs so people know what they need to do next to move forward in that process. And like I said, maybe reducing steps could be one option, but sometimes there's unnecessary friction. So for example, if I have to fill out a form, and then somebody will reach out to me and say, here's a link for you to schedule a call, or what time works for you, so on and so forth, versus can I directly book a call, or will there be an automated email that sends me a link and I can directly book that call after I fill out a form, etc. Similarly, sometimes instead of removing fields from your form, you can make it easier for people to understand why those fields are important. So let's say instead of asking for company size, which may feel like an unnecessary information that you're asking for, too much information, you can ask, how big is your team, so we can maybe tailor our approach to your specific needs, and so on and so forth. In some cases, real-time support, like a chat option, has also significantly helped increase people moving from one stage to another, where they simply needed to ask one small question instead of looking for it across the website. So there's small things that help when it comes to friction. And then, of course, there's low click-through rates on emails. There's long time to conversion, I think, is a big one. And this, I think, also is one of the most underrated sort of things. When I look at most marketing funnels, I think most of the times when it comes to services companies, the nurturing sequence or the nurturing process is almost non-existent. So let's say somebody comes to your website, they have filled out a form, but then there's nothing after that, right? There are no follow-up emails. They don't know what to do from there. They're going to wait for a newsletter. Will they need to schedule a call, so on and so forth. So having a nurturing sequence that's engaging, that's timely, that's not spammy, that's providing the right information to the right person at the right time, that could be extremely important. And this is also where your understanding of different segments in your lead funnel or your marketing funnel is important. So what are the different types of people or leads that you're receiving? What are they engaging with? Can you personalize some content based on that engagement? Can there be certain things you can do when people do something specifically? Maybe they download something, maybe they reach out with a specific question. Can there be certain things that you do there? I hope I didn't go over time. Did I? Are we on time, Fatma?
Yeah, we're on time.
Okay, great. So all of these things, I think what cuts across them is how well you understand the buyer's journey, how well you understand your own positioning, how well you understand who is involved in that buyer's journey at different stages and what they're looking for at each stage. That I would say is the most important part. I think, is Ali here? if he wants to add anything, and then we can also move on to the comments that people have, and if Ali wants to add anything to that.
Yes, no, thank you so much, Sana. I think we should go straight into the comments. There was a very chatty chat, which is always great to see. I can share some of the questions with you. The first question was by Muhammad Yusuf. Actually, before when we go into the questions, there's a little bit of a delay between when we are speaking and the comment when they see it. Like I think that's like 30 seconds or something like that. So from that perspective, Fatma, you got a lot of responses to people in terms of what it is that they were looking for, and they were consistent with what you were. It was both generating leads, closing deals, and then also the idea of holistic building a pipeline and creating the right message and to communicating to the customer. So very consistent with everything that we talk about in terms of in marketing. So I think the first question coming from Muhammad Yusuf Ayub was, and this is uh, my understanding of the context for this question is with when we're talking about when we're talking about solving this problem, the problems that arise and iterating and fixing the issues with it. Muhammad was talking about it with ICP. Sana, you did actually go over this topic a bit, but I think. And definitely the presentation talked about it a bit, but kind of like the role of ICP versus data, and or how you actually the interplay between them is probably the better question. Can you elaborate that a bit more, Sana?
Sorry, Ali, I think I lost you in the middle. My internet is glitching. I dropped you a message just now as
Oh,
well.
oh, okay.
Uh, yes,
Uh,
I lost you in the middle.
no worries. Yeah, we have. Muhammad Yusuf, he asked that what is question? He asked when we started talking about, hey, you have to figure out the issues and how do you get things to close, and you talked about ICP, and I think you definitely went over that in the conversation, but I think it would still be good to talk about the role of ICP and other things, the interplay between that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when he mentioned that, we were probably talking about content and not resonating and the back and forth in the buyer's journey, etc. So I think throughout the content funnel, and right when I started talking about the funnel as well, marketing funnel as well, um, I talked about the buyer's journey. And like I said, every buyer, if you know your ideal customer profile, for those who may not know what ICP is, but if you know your ideal customer profile, you would know exactly what their problem is. You would know where they look for information. You would know what their buying decisions and journey is like. Do they prefer, what channels they prefer to find solutions to the problems that they're facing, so on and so forth. And I think that clarity and the clarity of your positioning are sort of the cornerstones or the foundation of your marketing funnel of any content that you put out. So if that's clarified, it does solve a lot of the problems. But I think what I would still want to sort of stress on is going back to that the buyer's decision making process and the buyer's journey, there will still be phases where you go back and forth, right? People, we're dealing with humans, so they might change their mind, the economic situations might have changed, so on and so forth. So that need to look at your metrics and continuously tweak your marketing funnel and sort of personalize it wherever possible is still necessary, regardless of whether on a broader level you have your ICP sorted and your and your marketing funnels are sort of designed for it. So that would be my thoughts on that.
Fatma, anything you want to add to that?
Um, Not quite, but I think Sana captured it really well. So I think we can move on to the next question.
I would like to add one thing from a war story perspective in that you have an ICP and you did that exercise and you were sitting in this room and you did this, you saw this workshop and you did this exercise and over a week you perfected it and you convinced everyone this is what we're going to do, and then you started marketing it and you realized that your view of the world is not actually right. I can say that from our own journey in Flux 7, we actually had absolutely no idea about AWS and DevOps before we started it, and before we narrowed down on it. So while yes, your ICP will solve it, but what will solve your ICP? So it is an iterative, it is an iterative journey, and so that's also, I think, one thing that I would want. Say it would be a good thing to keep in mind in addition to everything that Sana and Fatma are mentioning. Okay, and the next question, and Sana, I think you were touching on this a little bit in terms of uh, the back and forth between sales and marketing.
Can you guys hear
Uh,
me?
yeah, we can hear you. You were knocked out for a very short time, but yeah, you're back now. So you we you mentioned the back and forth, and you just shared a little bit more details about the back and forth,
Yeah.
uh, and so uh, there's actually Omar Suleiman was asking more about it, and so if we can talk more about the back and forth about it. The question is, in the back
Yeah.
and forth part of sales and not marketing, in my opinion, marketing would get me talking to a prospect, and then the sales funnel takes over to close out the deal. How or why is the back and forth of marketing?
Yeah. So, Umair, what I would say is what you're saying is absolutely correct, right? The back and forth mostly happens when the lead has transferred from marketing to sales. That's when most of it happens because people are trying to make decisions. That's where they're trying to sort of compare, things change, so on and so forth. In terms of the marketing funnel itself, what I was specifically stressing more on was the fact that different people or different leads might enter at different stages of the funnel. So when we are looking at the funnel, most of the times we assume that every lead enters through the top of the funnel and then moves to this next stage and so on and so forth. But in a lot of cases, that doesn't happen. But even within marketing, it's very, I mean, again, dealing with humans, it's totally possible that after nurturing a lead for 6 months, they lose interest and they find something else, or their priorities change and they're no longer interested in it, or maybe they've pivoted, so on and so forth. And you have to nurture them in a different way if they're still a potential ideal customer for you. But you're right that most of that back and forth happens more towards the sales side of things when people might make change their minds, so on and so forth. um, but again, I would also say that the marketing and sales funnel, when I look at these two things, I don't look at them as two isolated sort of things happening. And in a lot of cases, right? Um, yeah. So briefly put, that's what I would say. I hope that answers your question.
I also want to add a couple of things here. So, first of all, Umair, I love this question. Thank you for asking this. This is a very, very interesting point that you've raised. And in particular, this is something that I've seen in my experience, at least, is unique to the tech services environment, where we see a sort of thin line. It's a thin, fluid line between marketing and sales. In a lot of other types of industries and a lot of other types of organizations, you do have a very defined marketing department. It has a very defined function that is mainly just bringing a prospect that then sales handles, and then sales does most of the rest of the conversations with that prospect. But in technology services and technology companies, what we've seen is that one, as Sana already mentioned, people don't always enter from the top and then go off to sales. They can enter at different stages, but the departments also work in very close coordination with each other. There might be people that, for example, you're already serving and they might have talked to you about one product or one service, but they are at a different point in the funnel for a different product or service, right? So that's one way that you see people go back and forth. Then we already talked about how there are a lot of touch points that, for especially for B2B and tech services, we see that there are a lot of touch points. And because there are a lot of touch points, people can actually move. Someone can attend a webinar, and the next time they can actually go a little bit back, and maybe they're just following you on social media now. So it's not that linear, and it's not that well defined a boundary. And in my opinion, this is actually one of the most interesting ways that sales and marketing work for tech services, because what this means is that there's a slight bit of a bystander effect. If you don't have very closely coordinated KPIs, or as Sana mentioned, possibly an SLA, then there might be a slight bystander effect where, one department might say, oh no, but this wasn't my job, and the other one might say this wasn't my job. But there's also a huge opportunity here, because you can actually very tightly integrate your marketing and sales teams so that they move as one team. And that means that your entire process, from finding someone to closing a deal to closing more deals with them, can actually be very nimble. So I hope that we've answered your question.
Thank you. I think Fatma, I actually really love the point about you have to play the sales and marketing, right? Like it is very, very easy to make them make their entire relationship between this sales does not follow up my leads, and the sales is bringing crap leads. So really, really good shout out there, Fatma. Thank you. Appreciate that. The next question we have is somewhat more of a tactical question around social media access from Pakistan, and how should we address how to address that. So, any quick thoughts on that question?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Are you saying that you're selling to people in the US, but you're unable to reach out to them through social media? Is that the question?
I think I don't. I guess I don't have the full context for it, but they're operating a project for a U.S. company in Pakistan, and not available to connect with them. Maybe some limitations on the government side in terms of social media access, and maybe they're managing some of the customers' portfolio. Some of that could be the problem, or it could also something that could be addressed by tools like uh, Hootsuite, etc., etc. Some of maybe some of that, and also any suggestions if we have some channels blocked, any how to is it worth trying to get around them, or is it should we just work with the channels that we have available to us?
Yeah, I think without the actual context, it's pretty tough to say what you should do. But again, I'm assuming if you're working on a project in USA from Pakistan and can't, again, I'm assuming you already have the project. Um, so again, I don't have context. I really don't know how to answer this question.
I think that makes sense. I think I'll reach out and to them directly,
Yeah, maybe
and we'll
if
get more.
Noor is still there and he can drop the context in a message, like I think. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So he meant his message. He said, "I have pre-launch marketing there for crowdfunding project."
Yeah, I think it makes sense to take it offline.
Yeah, I think if you could
Particularly. If
reach
it,
out separately, that would help.
um, okay. The next question that we have is again from Omer Suleiman. Uh, I offer conversion optimization for DTC brands, and the process I follow for my clients is similar to how I am building a pipeline for my startup at User B2B along the lines of the webinar. But I don't see much difference on the marketing side, but more on the sales side between B2B and B2C. Is my understanding correct?
So I think the first thing I would say is that even marketing for B2B is very different compared to B2C. So in B2C, most of the times the person buying is the user as well. Whereas in B2B, the user and the person making the decision to buy might be different, which means that your marketing at different stages of that decision is going to be different for different people, right? So multiple touch points, again, multiple people involved, and you're marketing to each one of them separately. So I would definitely not say that B2B marketing is very similar to B2C and it's just the sales which is different. Of course, sales also is very different, but marketing too would be different. Similarly, the channels that you use would be different. Thirdly, I would also think that a lot of when you're selling to individuals, those decisions can be emotion driven. For example, in when you talk about B2B, it can still be an irrational decision and it can still be an incorrect decision, but it's very driven. Sometimes it's driven out of fear, right? So I don't want to make a decision which is going to get me into trouble. So even if I'm making an irrational decision, I still need that marketing material that will help me say, here are the reasons why this is a better project, what can save me from eventually getting fired for choosing the wrong vendor, and so on and so forth. So I think the motivations, the way that decisions are made are different, which is why the marketing material, what you say, how you address those pain points, and where you serve that content and at what time is also very different. So there are multiple factors. I don't think they're similar in any way.
Fatma, anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I think Sana, I am in complete agreement with Sana. She put it really like hit the nail on the head there. I would just say that like when I started working out way back, one of the first teams that I worked with was a US based business that specialized in selling to the federal government. So my boss there said this thing that's just stayed with me for the rest of my career, which is that people buy from people they like. And I think that is a fundamental truth that is in common with any kind of marketing and sales, right? You have to have a certain level of personalization. People need to be able to relate to whatever you're saying in some capacity in a personal way. But like Sana said, B2B marketing is very different because people aren't buying for themselves anymore. The kind of stakes that they have, the kind of things that they need to prove, the boxes that they need to tick are different, and they are going to scrutinize your marketing from that perspective. So while the perhaps the fundamental truth stays the same, the actual approaches are very different. They are, poles apart in that way.
Thank you, thank you. And especially about the multiple people, but then each of the individual people needs to like you, which means that you need to understand each of the personas to get through. And really, I'd like to shout out for multiple stakeholders, and the stakeholders are invested in something external.
I think this might be going a little bit on a tangent, but if
Mhm.
you're in the services business and you're just starting out, I think that's also where again, not relevant to the question, but on a tangent, is that it's also where what I see is missing, but also very effective, is the founder's own personal brand. And how that is also integrated into your marketing funnel. I think that has a huge impact in terms of building your marketing funnel, and that works for B2B and B2C both. So again, not relevant to the question, but I think if anybody's really just starting out, your first X number of clients are going to come from how many people actually trust that you have the capability and are reliable enough to deliver on what you're promising. So maybe that's something to think about.
Absolutely, absolutely. Excellent call out. Like when your business doesn't have any credibility, it's your credibility.
Yeah.
But you, in the long term, as you scale, you want the business to have credibility because that's a sellable asset, not your credibility. Thank you. The next question we have is from Tech Hive, going deeper into the idea of B2B and enterprise. So Sana, you mentioned a co-working space with enterprise customers. that came through other channels, not website forms? And what should B2B companies expect? Large customers will not come through LinkedIn. While I disagree with they will not fill, large customers will fill out website forms and large customers will go through, come through LinkedIn, because, and also the point that we made in the previous question, and different people, different persona, you have to win multiple people and through different avenues. Uh, I'm gonna have Sana and Fatma, your opinion on this question. What are the channels they should be people should be targeting?
Yeah, I think a lot of questions when it comes to marketing, etc. Generic, there's a lot of generic advice out there, right? But without a lot of context, that generic advice, I think you'll find a lot of it out there. When I was specifically referring to, and like Ali also mentioned, when I was specifically referring to the co-working space, the buying journey, the buyer's journey, when I'm saying enterprise clients, I understand that journey, and that journey I know does not start from the website form. But that doesn't mean that it never starts there for all enterprise clients, right? So for us, when we were selling serviced offices, we know that those clients came through real estate agents. And so our part of the marketing campaign included sort of building that network and so on and so forth. So most of those clients came through that channel. But like Ali said, it can still be your website, because who is making that decision and who is looking for that vendor, again, in a large enterprise versus a small business, will be two very different people. In a large enterprise, it could be an admin guy looking for, or a finance guy, an assistant looking for a finance tool, just doing the initial research. For example, if you're a financial services consultant, let's just say. In a larger organization, it might be a different person. So yeah, I think it's not, I don't think I can say that you will never find enterprise clients on LinkedIn, or you will never find an enterprise client that fills out a form on your website. Talking about enterprise clients, when we were selling recruitment services, all our leads, or most of our leads, not all, but most of our leads actually came through our website and the form on the website, right? Because it was technically, even if it was a larger client, it was an HR assistant or an HR manager sort of looking for options and sort of reaching out to as many potential service providers as possible. So I wouldn't say that those are not options at all. It goes back to, do you understand the journey that your buyer is going to take to get from finding people and finding information around the problem that they're trying to solve, all the way to making that purchase. So it could be through the form, it could be through LinkedIn, it could be through referrals, it could be through affiliates, it could be through an ad, it could be anything. It just depends on who your client is.
So I would just like to add to that. So exactly as Anna said, you can't really write any channel off. But this also reminded me of research that I think Google conducted, and it's been a few years since then, so I don't have the exact reference off the top of my head. But according to the research that they found, a lot of B2B buying journeys do actually start on social media. And that is because they're not starting with the guy who's going to, or the girl who's going to actually sign off on the dotted line. They are starting off with the people who work for them. So with B2B, this is one of the beauties of the B2B marketing funnel. You are talking to someone who is perhaps the second in command, and they are the ones who are going to then take your brand over to the decision maker, who is then going to make the final call. And you need to convince both of them individually in their capacities where they are, right? So you do have those people on LinkedIn. They are seeing your brand on LinkedIn. But with a lot of consumer marketing, we have way shorter sales cycles. We've already seen this. We have 8 touch points on average for B2B marketing. And one of the illusions that can sometimes create is that a particular channel didn't really work out for you, because someone who came to you did not buy within a shorter period of time. But that's not actually how it's working, right? All those touch points do matter. They are part of the journey that your potential customer has with your brand, and they are opportunities for you to engage with them.
So I would add one thing for emerging tech services companies in particular, um, and this is going to be a very, very opinionated, uh, uh, very biased answer, which probably is the value coming from it. But when I say emerging tech services, or actually when I say tech services company, I'm sure you've heard of the phrase "nobody got fired for buying for IBM." And when you're looking at enterprise, the stakeholder on the other side, they have two incentives. Number one, don't get fired. Number two, get a promotion. And you are an unknown. Realistically speaking, you are an unknown. If you get a large enterprise client, it's most likely going to be a fluke unless you have something that the big consulting companies cannot offer you.
Yeah. Right.
And which means that almost inevitably, this is just a reality. Everyone will say this is a bad thing and complain about it, but the reality is technology is sold as technology. Technology is not the cloud is sold as cloud. The cloud is not sold as resilient infrastructure or resilient resilient automated infrastructure. The cloud is AI is sold as AI. AI is not sold on the value. Technology is sold on the technology, and and that means that almost all like a lot of new technology decisions are being made by going to the partner and getting a referral from the partner. So more than in other services company, you really need to really show up for your partner. Convince the partner that I will make your technology, I will make your product proliferate through the world. So a very religious thing that I had to add. We are actually at the end of the time, and but we actually do still have some questions remaining. Sana and Fatma, is it okay if we go a little bit over time?
Yep.
Fine, fine.
Okay, so there are two questions by Abu Tarab. Uh, in content marketing, what proportion of video content and other formats of content would you suggest for B2B? And the second question is, what proportion of efforts would you suggest for each of the platforms for B2B marketing, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook? So, for content format for in particular around video content, and then the channels.
So if I was being honest, I don't think I can answer those questions. One, because when it comes to video content, I have not worked on video content too much. Of course, we read all these reports and research on what's working. Obviously, there are different platforms trying to sort of push different types of content. So LinkedIn is pushing different video formats now. There's that TikTokization of like the entire marketing funnel as well. Um, but I think again, I would again give a generic answer, then maybe Ali and Fatma can add on to it. But I would go back to again knowing where your customer, to both your questions, where is your customer and what are they looking for in what format? How do they engage with content? So I was just looking at this research today that sort of shows how different generations, so from the baby boomers to the millennials and then the Gen Zs and so on and so forth, what kind of content they actually engage with. So for example, Gen Alpha is not really sort of engaging with podcasts versus Gen Z that is, and so on and so forth. Right? So I think it's more about understanding where the demographic for your service is, and then if they're, let's say, on LinkedIn, what is the content format that LinkedIn is pushing to your audience. So that would be my generic thing, but I haven't tested video content a lot. the very little content that I have tested has not worked for me. So I don't think I can comment a lot on what proportion of video content you should be doing. I'll let Fatma and Ali maybe add to that.
Yeah, so I would agree with Sana. I don't think this is a question of what proportion at all. If I'm very honest, I mean, we've read the reports, we know the research. But if I say what proportion, there's no magic number because that's not how content marketing works. One, it evolves very quickly. But two, that is not the way you should be making content, right? You shouldn't be making content like, oh, I need to make 5 videos and 10 blog posts, right? You have to ask yourself, who am I making this for? When are they going to see it, and where are they going to see it? And those are some really fundamental questions that you need to ask about your content marketing. So as Sana said, you need to understand who your audience is, and then what are the things that that audience is looking for. But then you should also design your content that, especially in the case of B2B business or tech services marketing, you should design your content to solve a problem, right? And that means your content needs to be consumable. The format of it should be determined by wherever you're sharing it, or when you're sharing it with them. Further down the funnel, is it, or have they just engaged with your brand, and so on. But that's what you really need to do. And my recommendation is more is better than less. If your message, if your content is consumable in more formats, there is a greater chance that it will resonate. um, let's say you have a checklist, you could make a video out of it, but is that really the best way to give that to someone? If someone is collecting information about different platforms, and one of the platforms that you deliver on, you can present that information in a lot of ways that would be more effective than making a video out of it. And that's just, I'm not, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't make videos out of it. That just gives you an idea of the thought process that you should apply to your content marketing. When you're designing content, you need to ask yourself, okay, when I make this content like this, whose problem does this solve, and when does it solve that for them? And I think that applies to the second question as well. Because again, I mean, one thing is for sure, the way that we've seen social media platforms come and go. If I were to say that, there's a specific place for any particular social media channel, by name in your B2B marketing strategy, that would be like being in like 2004, 2005 and saying you need to be on MySpace. And we saw how that turned out, right? You need to think at a strategic level, and you need to ask yourself, where are the people that I need to reach, and then decide your channels according to that. So if the people you need to reach are on LinkedIn, you need to be on LinkedIn, and if they're on YouTube, then you need to be on YouTube. But that again goes back to, as Sana said, defining your ideal customer profile and figuring out who needs to see you, so that then you can figure out where they're more likely to see you.
I was just trying to look for that research. So I don't know if you guys, any of you follow Neil Patel, but it's a research by Neil Patel. And I think what's interesting about it is that there's two formats that their research, which is based on, I think, over 6,000 people of different age groups. There are two formats that all generations from baby boomers to Gen Alpha seems to be engaging with, and that's long form videos and short form videos. Everything else is, it varies. So blog posts, webinars, podcasts, that varies across generations, but those are two. But again, I think this is very generic, kind of across the board thing. And again, I think also anything that you're building in content wise, as long as you're dependent on platforms like LinkedIn and other social media platforms, you will always be dependent on what kind of format are they pushing at that point in time. So at the end of everything, your content strategy should really focus on building your own mailing list so that you can actually own your distribution channels, which right now you're sort of on rented, you're renting those eyeballs, and any algorithm can change at any point. So as long as you're sort of pushing them towards your email marketing or your mailing list or whatever it is, that in the way that you sort of build that community around your brand, I think that's super important.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we are well past time, but speaking of the topic diagnosing leaks in your marketing funnel, I just realized a pretty big leak on from the sides of both Vixul and Minerva. We actually never bothered even telling anyone about Vixel or Minerva. So I think maybe we can do quick pitch and description on both for our companies. And Sana, if you would start.
Sure. So Minerva, in the simplest words, is we're trying to build an ecosystem for leaders, executives, and founders, where we can provide whatever leaders, executives, founders they need to build better businesses and careers. Right now, one of our most important sort of programs that we're running is a CEO mastermind, where we're helping CEOs of companies that have reached product market fit and beyond scale their leadership. So this is not like a business coaching, even though obviously there's some parts of business coaching always, but it's sort of like a peer-led mastermind where we help leaders scale their leadership, because we feel like most of the times that organizations are unable to scale beyond product market fit is because the founder hasn't made that transition to leader and is still working in the business rather than on the business. So yeah, that's what we do at Minerva.
Thank you, Sana. And on the Vixel side, we're building in the ecosystem for emerging tech services companies, and we want the same resources to be available on the tech services side that are available to tech product companies. So, um, guidance, investment, uh, communities, networks, and a playbook on how it is that you're supposed to actually build these kinds of businesses. And so we're focused purely on early stage tech services companies. Once you hit $10 million in revenue, there is an existing ecosystem with the private equity world, and we want to fill the gap before that. And we have our next bootcamp application is closing in 10 days. So if you're interested in Vixel, please fill out an application. With that, well, thank you so much for your time, Sana and Fatma.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for all of the very useful information and kind of the guidance. And it was really useful from the perspective of real world lived experiences from the both of you.
Awesome. Thanks so
Thank you.
much for having me. Thank you, Fatma, for
And thank you, everyone, for all of the great questions and being a very engaged audience.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sana.
all right, guys.